Welcome back to Going Walkabout. For some reason, people have been searching for other places to live. In fact, in the last 48 hours, the searching for this has spiked enormously. I think we can all guess why. Since we've been living outside the United States for over 3 years now, I thought I would do a breakdown of 5 things that you should consider if you're thinking of living outside the United States. For those of you who may not see the channel before, we're Carl and Susan Steele, and we have been living out of the United States with geo arbitrage for 3 years. We have our first year of slow travel that you can refer to because there's a lot of information in there about living outside the US, as well as the second year of slow travel that you can refer to, and that has a huge amount of information as well. In this video, I'll go over these top 5 steps that you can take to begin your ability to live outside the United States. And at the end, I will go over our top 5 places that we have found after traveling to well over 20, 30 countries. These are 5 places that we would consider living, and I'll explain to you why we would consider living there. So let's jump right into number 1. So number 1, the first thing that we would have you consider is why you want to move. It's pretty important to be clear on what are you trying to achieve. Are you trying to get to a place that is a lower cost of living, where you can do somewhat of a geo arbitrage type situation? Do you want to find a place where you feel like it's a better cultural fit for you? That's pretty important, and it's high on a lot of people's lists. For us, we wanted to be able to retire and live in a place that we could live financially more comfortably and where we felt we fit into the culture a little better. So I would just say it's important to be clear on those things. I did do a video on how to live abroad part-time for less, very much having all of those pointers in it and details about things like taxes and visas and so forth. So please have a look at that video because there's a lot of information in that one. But it's important to be clear on your motivations about why you want to move, and that will help you very much find the place that you may want to move to, right? So that would be the next step that we're going to take. Number 2, we have a big topic, and this is money and budgeting. So you'll need to consider, if you are currently in a mode where you're still working, you'll need to consider how you're going to work in another country. The good news is that many countries now have digital nomad type of visas where you can stay for a year. So certainly if you're of the age where you're still working, look into that. We're retirement age, and so a lot of this is going to be advice coming from somebody who's retired. With that said, you are going to need to build a budget. And everybody's budget is going to be different, obviously, depending on what they can afford. For us, we have found the most expensive thing is always accommodation. So when you're building a budget, that's going to be your biggest number. Your second biggest number is usually going to be food, and then after that is going to be transportation. The good news is in many places we don't need a car, but if you have to rent a car, that's usually a pretty big price tag. The last thing that you'll have to consider is insurance. We are on Medicare, so we haven't had to buy insurance, but certainly if you're not currently on Medicare, you'll want to look into a good international insurance policy of some sort. In an effort to help you, and in full disclosure, our budget over the last 3 years has been roughly $5,000 a month, and I can tell you the bulk of that does go to accommodation. We are using Airbnb. We'll talk a little bit more about accommodation in a moment, but I will tell you that that is why that number is that high. You're going to want to put like 10 to 15% wiggle room either way on whatever budget number that you come up with. It's going to fluctuate depending on where you go, what that country's economic situation is like. What we have noticed is inflation is pretty much worldwide, so things have been a lot more expensive than we thought they were going to be. When it comes to banking, you're best to leave your money in the US banks until you fully move 100%. US banking has great internet banking, and for 3 years now I have been dependent on my internet banking, and it has not failed me once. It's been fantastic, and I have 3 different accounts that I have to get into for banking. So make sure before you do a move that you've got all your banking done online And then the next thing is you'll want to make sure that all your bill pay is online. The other part of bill pay is you're going to want to try to skinny your bills down as much as possible. I literally only pay 6, sometimes 8 bills a month, and that is in my internet banking system in the bill pay. I've gone down to only 3 credit cards. I have our cell phones and then our storage unit, which we do on direct debit. You're going to want all of the things you pay for to be in that bill pay system, and that makes it very easy for you to change, manipulate, stop payment, do whatever you need to do can be easily done from your internet banking system. But it's real important to kind of skinny down what your outgoings are. And that should be pretty easy, right? Because you're getting ready to possibly move, so you're going to probably be getting rid of a lot of things that you pay for now that you won't be paying for in the future. We have found that this is a really critical thing. Simplifying your finances before you leave the United States is really important, because trying to do things when you're in a different country can be very difficult. You'll also want to simplify things because it gives you better peace of mind. You don't want to be moving somewhere else and taking a baggage of worry with you because of bills and things of that nature and how you're going to pay for them. So I would say this is a pretty critical juncture on the list of things to do. Is number 2, your money, your budgeting, and then your payments and finances are pretty important to get that part of your house in order. Number 3 is choosing where you will go, and I'm sure everybody thinks, oh, that should be really easy. And after somebody who's been doing this for 3 years, I can tell you it's not that easy. It's more difficult than you think, because you have to really like the culture you're going to. When you're on vacation, you're happy to look at pretty things. You're not necessarily scrutinizing the culture, but when you're going to live in a place, you start really looking at things like, are these people friendly? Is it easy to do transactions? Is the culture rich in history? Is the culture rich in tradition? Those things might mean a lot to you. They do to me, so certainly that's a big deal for me. So you're moving somewhere is a very different field than it is when you're going on holiday somewhere. Also plan on wherever you do choose that you're going to want to spend a minimum of a month, better at least 3 months in that particular location. It really takes time to get to know a place, to get to know the people, their cadences, their traditions, and so forth. So plan on having that time to spend there. What we have found over 3 years is that many places are beautiful, but the people aren't that friendly, or they may be very inexpensive, but you can't live there 6 months a year because it's monsoonal rains, which is pretty uncomfortable. We've just come away from that in Costa Rica. So I would make a list with your top 3 places, and then obviously start with number 1, the first one on your list. I wouldn't worry too much about, is it an English-speaking culture or place, because what we have found is that where we've been, and we've been everywhere from Tunisia to Turkey and Italy, most people, or a good amount of people, will speak some English. Once you then decide that's a culture you're going to live in, you can go full force in learning their language, which is obviously really important, but I wouldn't be intimidated by the language if in fact you really like the culture in the place. Number 4 is real important, and that's visas. And what you're going to want to do is, once you determine a place that you think you can call home, you are going to want to go to the government website. Most countries that we have been to, including the Schengen area in Europe, allow for 90 days. So you're pretty good for 90 days. You're pretty good for that test period of kind of figuring out if you like the place. If you like the country, you're going to need to rely on the government site for a deep dive, because every country, even if they're in Schengen or not, are completely different on the type of visas that they allowed. As I mentioned, some might have digital nomad, some don't, so you really need to look into that. We actually did, the video that we did on the 2nd year of slow travel has a lot of information on that, because we were really looking at getting residency in Mexico at that time. And so that might give you a good idea of just how much it takes to actually take that next step after the visa. Usually it's visa, then long-term visa, and then residency. So do look into that. The other reason you're going to want to look into all of that information is because depending on what age you are, and again, this is if you're retirement or not, money that you make, you will be double taxed on. So some countries will tax you on money you make, some won't. You will always pay tax to the United States. It is one of the only countries in the world where you will always pay tax. So that's something to consider in the country that you're moving to and what their tax requirements may or may not be. It's something that we've looked into pretty carefully when we've narrowed down the countries that we would like to be living in. Number 5 is planning your getaway. This is the final step. You've skinnied all of your finances down, you've got your financial house in order, you've determined where you want to go, so then you're going to be taking those next steps. And you may have really gone full boat like we did. You may have sold your house, all your furniture, and all your belongings. With that said, that's not a bad thing to do. We did that 3 years ago, and we're really glad we did because it allowed us not to worry when we were traveling about things at home. And so I will say that anecdotally, that's something we did, and I highly recommend it. And it's actually a really freeing feeling too, not having all those possessions that you have to be concerned about. So now you need to work on your departure date and your mode of transportation. That's really critical. The third thing that is really critical is going to be your accommodation. And I actually did a video on this, and I'm going to put that picture up over here because it details how to go through the steps of getting accommodation on Airbnb successfully. We've done this for 3 years in a row, knock on wood, successfully. We have not had any bad Airbnb issues, and I think it's due to the process that we go through. You may be asking, why don't you do a lease somewhere? And that's absolutely possible. The challenge with leases is they usually have to be a year. And you can do it. You would go through a realtor in an area, and let's say our case, it might be Nice, France. You would go through a local realtor and they could certainly find you different accommodation, but you would need to sign a 1-year lease. And that's what's prohibited us from using that method. Now we are going to be going back to France shortly, and we will most likely be going to that method because I guarantee you that'll be saving probably about 50% over what we pay monthly with Airbnb. So have a look at my tips video on how to get good accommodation. It's going to be critical, especially if it's one of your first times out of the country. You want to make sure the place is comfortable, that it's clean, and it's in a safe area, and that you're comfortable, because that makes all the difference in the world in your transition to moving out of the country. But don't go for less than a month, and if you can, try to stay for 90 days, because that's going to be the proof in the pudding if you really like the culture of the country and you feel good about moving on. So as I said in the beginning, we've been on this journey now for 3 years. We've stayed in numerous countries, numerous cities, and we've kind of got it boiled down to 5 places that we feel the most comfortable that we could live in. Pretty much any one of the 5. So I'll go over them in sort of order, starting with number 5 and then going up to number 1. For number 5 for us, what a city we really liked, or a place we really like, is Barcelona, Spain. Barcelona is a very beautiful city. It is right on the ocean, but at the foot of mountains. It's in a great location in Spain in as much as you've got the Spanish railway, so you can get to places easily. You can get to the Costa del Sol and see all of that. South of Spain has beautiful weather. The people are not super friendly. They're a little cordial, but they're very nice. And the food is fantastic. So shopping for food and all that is really fun. They have some of the best restaurants in the world in Barcelona. Barcelona as a city, if you're going to live in a city, it probably feels the most like the countryside because all of the streets are incredibly wide and they have loads of trees. So it's just a beautiful environment, and one that we actually feel very comfortable in whenever we go there. Number 4, we have Sardinia, Italy, and we spend a lot of time in mainland Italy. We have done Como and Florence and Rome. We found that Sardinia as far as Italy goes, and Italians, was the friendliest place. And then Sardinia is beautiful because it's an island and it's got really high mountains. So for people that like hiking and so forth, you've got your mountains. But if you like the ocean, it's got one of the most beautiful ocean areas in all of the Mediterranean. It's a big enough island that you don't get that kind of crazy island feeling. However, it's small enough that you can easily get around by car. They don't have the best rapid transit there, so you do need a car. And they have two main cities there, Caglia and Olbia, and both of those are fairly cosmopolitan, and you can have a very nice time staying in those. But the countryside is beautiful, and again, a place that we feel very comfortable that we could live in and be pretty content in. Number 3 for us is Dorset, England, and this one is kind of a no-brainer. Carl, my husband, grew up in England, and we've spent a lot of time there. We actually lived there in the 80s. The English countryside is really beautiful, and in Dorset, because they have such large landholders, they didn't build the countryside up at all. So it is just as pristine and beautiful as it was when my husband was a small child. The English people are very polite, they're very friendly, and obviously they speak English. So it's really good on a lot of those levels. The downside to England is it's expensive, and certainly buying real estate there is going to be very expensive. So that's something that we're considering and why we haven't just initially moved there out of the gate. Number 2 for us is Nice, France, where we've spent a lot of time in the last 3 years. The south of France is absolutely beautiful. The weather is fairly mild all year round, although they do get snow right up in the mountains, which are the French Alps, and it's right there. So it's another one of those where the mountains meet the ocean type of situation. And one of the best things about Nice in the south of France is the rail system, in which case you can have a day in Cannes, or literally just very easily within moments, pop over the border and go to Italy. So that ability to travel easily on a train makes it wonderful. You don't need a car. So that Nice area is great, but I'm gonna also say anywhere in the south of France is a pretty nice place to live. And we have found the French to be incredibly nice and friendly. So I just want to dispel, if you people have heard anything negative, that's not the experience that we have had. And as you probably have heard, the food is fabulous. So that's something we really enjoy there, whether it's food shopping or going out to eat. We do love that about France. So number 1, and I know this is going to shock a lot of people, but for us, the number 1 place that we've spent the most time in the last 3 years is Mexico City. And I know a lot of people think Mexico City is dangerous. As a person who grew up in Los Angeles, no comparison. This is so much safer than Los Angeles. I mean, think of South Central or downtown LA. All of Mexico City is safer than those areas. They do have a great infrastructure of police here and the military. So between the two, you're pretty well covered. The other wonderful thing about Mexico City is that the city has got so many walking paths, huge deep sidewalks. So you can theoretically walk wherever you need to go, whether that's the grocery store or to meet somebody for lunch at a restaurant. With that said, it's got as many restaurants as any metropolitan like New York or San Francisco. So many fabulous restaurants. We've yet to try even a smidgen of them. And then as far as groceries and things of that nature, we have found their produce to be of a very high standard because they grow a lot in the country here. But you can also get a lot of fish because the country has got oceans, all around it. So they do really well with fish and shrimp and things of that nature. So it checks the box on a lot of things for us. Living in Mexico City then allows you to go to other places in Mexico easily, like San Miguel de Allende, Oaxaca, Huatulco, Puerto Vallarta. So you've got a lot of options for travel with staying within the country. So certainly would say if you're going to explore an area to live permanently, Mexico is pretty high on our list. So that's it. That's our 5 steps that we would recommend that you look at if you're considering moving outside the United States. And that's 5 places that you may want to consider visiting so that you can kind of get a jump start on places that might be nice to live in. I hope this information is helpful. I know a lot of people are feeling very stressed right now, and certainly just having some kind of guidance for other alternatives can make people feel a lot better. I know it helps me whenever I'm feeling in a stressed out situation. Enjoyed this video? I would certainly appreciate a thumbs up. I would also appreciate any feedback you have, if you can put those in the comments below. The feedback is absolutely so helpful, and for other people reading that feedback, other places that you might have been to that you really believe would be great for somebody to relocate from the United States to. People would love to be able to read that. So thank you again, and if all of that works out, please subscribe. We try to do a new video every week. We've been doing this for 3 years now. So thanks so much again for watching. Cheers for now.